Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and if you follow the ski news, you saw that Jeremy Nobis died in a jail cell this week. This is such a sad story, as while I didn't know Jeremy personally, other than our podcast and way too many late-night text messages, he was one of those skiers that totally changed the game of big mountain skiing, starting with what he did in TGR's Harvest, and he could still have been putting together epic movie parts if it weren't for his love of alcohol. It's no secret that Nobis had a problem with drinking. I personally believe that, and who knows what else, contributed to some form of mental illness. Like I said, this is a sad story and it could have been avoided. Maybe. I mean, if you see a friend going through demons with alcohol, with most people, it's best to intervene. With Jeremy, people have tried over the years, but there always are some people, like Jeremy, who only have one speed, and that's both a blessing and a curse. The ski and the snowboard industry is a revolving door of adrenaline and alcohol, it seems like. That's part of the reason why I went with Best Day Brewing as a sponsor this season, because it's time to stop glorifying alcohol in this industry, and I wanted to let me and others know that alcohol doesn't always have to be the choice. While this is such a huge loss for skiing, I hope Jeremy has found some peace and that his demons are gone. I'm so sorry for his family, his friends, and anyone he had an impact on. I'm stoked that I was able to get him to really drop his guard and talk about the real shit when we podcasted. Jeremy, thank you for that. You will be missed. And to coldly change the subject here, another thing that will be missed is ski and snowboard season. For me, it's the last 2 weekends at the summit at Snoqualmie. It was another really fun year of shredding with the boy, friends, and using skiing to not only have fun, but to forget about my problems. If you have a lot of shit going on in your life, stand on top of something steep that scares you. It'll make you forget about all that shit. And then after that, talk to someone. A friend, a therapist, family, anyone. It really will help. Speaking of help, my guest this week has done so much to help the ski industry. Chris Jerard, aka CJ, had a long career in the magazine business, and then he pivoted to digital at the right time. And now he finds himself as the VP of Content Marketing at one of the biggest media groups in the business, Outside. And along the way, Chris has created companies and was one of the founders of the Association of Free Skiing Professionals. He's made a huge impact on snow, and his story is a good one. And I asked some tough questions at the end, and he handles them like a champ. Before we get into it, I want to ask you again to please tell a friend about the show and star rate me or review me on iTunes, as both of those things really help the show grow, and it's greatly appreciated. What's also greatly appreciated is if you support the brands that make this podcast happen. So listen to the ads, check out their products, and buy them, as I only work with the best brands. And they are Stanley, Elon Skis, Rollerblade, Best Day Brewing, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Now, let's talk with Chris Jerard. We're going to start the podcast out with something fun. You were with Freeskier for a long time, and Freeskier was known for legendary partying, amongst other things. What's the wildest party story from that time? And please name names if you're comfortable with that.
Wildest party story. There are a lot. Two that come to mind that are different eras, basically. And one was when we got the tour bus. It was very early. This is like 99, 2000. And we took a tour bus to Vegas for SIA. And it was in our first couple of years, we were fighting to get any sort of recognition in free skiing at that point. I mean, people were like, free skier, like it's free. You know, we were still explaining what free skiing was.
Right.
And so we had to make a mark. So we got this tour bus, man, and drove down from Colorado and parked it out front at the trade show and the Hard Rock. And we had JP and JF and Lubeck. And I mean, everybody spent time on that thing. It just ran 24 hours a day. We were sponsored by Smirnoff and Red Bull, and there were some really wild moments on that thing in Vegas in particular in that first year. Just a 24-hour party in Vegas on a bus with that era, Shane Anderson, just a lot of folks going deep and long and then getting up and going into the trade show the next day.
So just a constant stream of people in and out of the bus, people you know, people you don't know. There's different rooms in the bus and all kinds of debauchery going on.
Yeah, you know, I mean, the debauchery wasn't too diabolical. You've been there, Mike. Like, it was ski industry, people having a lot of fun, but it never slept. It just went nonstop for that whole week down there. And the drivers were sort of security, and it was hard to, it was a limited number of people that could come on. And it really helped reinforce what we were trying to do with the brand, which was, it was all about the athletes. And it gave me, as a young person coming in with really no connections, I just spent a lot of time with a lot of folks that I'd really respected and had looked up to that were athletes. And it went off. The second one was a hot tub party that we did at the World Skiing Invitational up on the deck of the Gearbelly lift company there, GLC. Is that right? GLC?
GLC, right in the village, right up at the top of the village.
Yeah. We put 2 big hot tubs right there. And it was in the era of our Freeskier girls team. And it was bikinis and people in the springtime, just a lot of drinking and just a lot of fun. But right in the center, thousands of people below you in the square there with the big air happening, and just a lot of fun, man. Yeah. Those are 2 that stick out.
Both from the glory days, it seems like. And we're not going to talk about the glory days for too long in the beginning because we got to talk about you growing up in New Hampshire. And I'm going to guess you weren't the biggest partier growing up. It sounds like you were every parent's dream. And while we won't spend too much time talking about your childhood either, because this is a business episode, I do want to find out what your folks did, and was it rich, poor, or average growing up?
I think probably average. I mean, now I look back at it and I'm one of 4. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. My parents are both teachers. My dad was a college professor and my mom was an elementary school teacher. So educator salaries and 4 kids. I mean, we didn't want for anything, Mike, right? But, we drove old used cars and 6 of us shared one bathroom, and my parents were into education, and it was never about money. So great childhood. My parents are amazing. My dad is a mechanical engineering professor, or was. He's retired now. And they got me skiing in one way or another. They grew up skiing in central New Hampshire. My home mountain was Whaleback, which eventually Evan Divig took over, and night skiing and getting dropped off there by my parents after school, and just loving that from a super early age. And they encouraged it. And we had to choose. I mean, in terms of our means, it was like you could play ice hockey or you could ski. You couldn't do both. Some kids did, but we couldn't afford to do both. So I chose skiing early on, and they were just really supportive of that love from a young age.
It kind of makes sense that having both parents as teachers doesn't mean that you live this privileged ski life that a lot of people live that are on the podcast, because teachers, we all know that they don't make the most money in the world by any means. But the interesting thing about your childhood, it sounds like you were like a serial entrepreneur growing up. These days, it's kind of hidden because you're working with a big media conglomerate. But over the years, you started a lot of different things. That all starts when you're younger. What kind of side hustles did you have when you were a kid?
Yeah, I mean, I always was looking for ways to go knock on doors around the neighborhood, make little flyers. My buddy's name was Bobby. So we had Chris and Bob's Odd Jobs. We'd stuff pamphlets into everybody's mailbox and just take whatever, weeding, vacuuming, shoveling, anything people needed, we would do. Just hustling, man, like knocking on people's doors and saying, hey, do you need anything done, to try to earn a little scratch to buy a bike that summer or whatever it might be. And that continued through high school, and always was trying to find a way to earn money in a way that was really about work and interacting with people, right? Like going to people's front doors and saying, hey, it looks like your trim sort of needs to be painted. And getting rejected a lot early, I think, was helpful later in my career, just being in sales. I worked on boats also. So I was a first mate on boats out of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, all through high school and even into college. That was really formative also in terms of teamwork and structure and working for a captain.
So you're a go-getter. You're always doing something. And when I looked into your high school days, it seemed like you were a champion in Twister. You were a baseball player, and you were a class president and a valedictorian. What kind of group does that put you in? Were you a nerd? Were you a go-getter, a young lifer, a jock? Who was Chris in high school?
I was not valedictorian. I was class president. I was into sports. I played soccer. I played baseball early. I played basketball, but I'm like vertically challenged, and that ended pretty quickly. I ended up playing ice hockey in high school also, but was really terrible. Just all my friends did it. So I learned to skate by trying out for the varsity team. I couldn't even stop. I just slam into the boards.
Happy Gilmore.
Yeah, it was something like that. It was just to be part of that peer group, but I was not a standout athlete. I was a good athlete for New Hampshire, small time sports, played varsity and that kind of stuff. But that all ended in high school. I didn't know aspirations of playing beyond that. I was like captain and stuff basically because I was more of a leader. I would like get people aligned, but I was never the best athlete.
You're the class president guy, the guy always bringing everybody together and making sure everybody knows what's going on. You're the guy pointing everyone in the right direction, and there's a lot of value to that.
Yeah, I like that. I'm social. I love working with teams and getting people aligned on a mission. And I also was the first kid of 4, right? So I sort of had that built into my family dynamic. And I think it carried on through high school and beyond.
And from what I gather about high school, the biggest influence of your post-high school life was a kid that you weren't maybe the best of friends with in high school, but he was a neighbor of yours. His name was Josh Hardy. And he seemed like the cool kid into music, skateboarding, all kinds of types of shit. And he was sick. And I think he eventually died from cancer or whatever disease he had. But he was a guy who really inspired you to be more free-spirited in your life. Can you kind of describe that?
Yeah, Mike, that's deep research, man. Yeah, Josh was a massive influence, a turning point in my life early on. He was a really good friend of mine. We were in slightly separate groups, but he was my neighbor. So like we would ride the bus together. He'd come over to my house. We'd shoot hoops every day. Just a very good friend. He got brain cancer when we were 17, going into our junior year. And at that point, you're 17, you're sort of invincible. I wish I knew as much as I did when I was 17, right? Like I sort of had it all figured out in my own mind. And
right.
Suddenly this thing, which no one understood, was like, whoa, shit, Josh has brain cancer. And he was like an incredibly talented athlete, both as a skater, a surfer. He also played soccer and was like one of our best players. He was a really good athlete, much better than I was. And he fought this brain cancer, from the time we went into our junior year until January of our senior year, and when he passed on. And cancer is terrible. I know you've been touched by that too in that way. And it's this process. And some people make it through it, and Josh didn't. And, at 18, it was like, wow, you can die, right? And to watch Josh and the courage that he went through that whole process with, and the things he talked about as his body deteriorated, it just opened my eyes to, I was sort of a little type A-ish. A lot of people in the school I went to, and, we grew up in Durham, New Hampshire. Like I said, I wasn't the valedictorian, but there were a lot of very smart kids going to Ivy League schools. And, it sort of was like, maybe I would be a lawyer or something. I had a track in my mind, the track. Like I was going to do well in school, check the boxes, and then go to a good college. And when that happened to Josh, it just opened up my eyes and a bunch of other people's. So we just said, what do we actually want to do? Like, what do we really want to do with our life? Not what we think success is or what we think others might think is important. And it just totally opened up a new pathway. I decided I didn't want to go to college right away. I wanted to travel. Me and my 3 best friends bought a 1974 Ford Econoline in 1991 or 2 for $500. It was totally broken down, and we fixed it up, and we actually brought the van into our shop class and totally redid the whole thing and got it all ready. And we were like, we're not going to college. We're going to take a year off, and we're going to go travel the country, and we're going to end up out in some ski country and ski. That was after Josh. The calculus was like, if we were going through what he went through, that's exactly what we want to do. We'd want to travel and ski. And that's what we did.
That's awesome. That guy inspires you to change your whole life and not go on the track that your parents expect you to go on, and kind of changes everything for you going forward because of that van trip. And the next stop for you is the University of Colorado. And for a lot of people, school's something they do almost to check a box, and it mainly becomes about partying and learning about life. But for you, based on you graduating magna cum laude, were you the kid who was really trying hard in college, like getting to know all your professors and shit like that?
Probably a little bit. I'd taken that time off and ski bummed up in Summit County. We ended up in the East Coast of the West Coast, Colorado. We'd come to find out later, like maybe we should have kept going further west, but Summit County, Copper Mountain, turned screws, worked at a ski shop, ski repair. And that experience of being on my own, totally on my own, my parents were supportive, but not financially, that sort of put me in a place that when I did apply and went to CU, I was very much like, I'm here for a specific purpose, which is to learn. And I've already partied a lot and had a really good time basically skiing every day, that I was pretty focused and I found the stuff I loved, which was writing. I was in the creative writing program, actually with an emphasis on poetry, and just got way into it, Mike. I was like those kids sitting under a tree with a notebook, like writing constantly. So I wasn't involved in the fraternity system. I had my good friends. I never lived in the dorms because I came in a year late,
Right.
And I was super conscientious. I wanted to get competitive. Like I wanted to always do the best that I could. And probably in retrospect, the funny thing is if I could go back and talk to myself, I'd be like, you don't actually need to work quite as hard as you are in terms of getting good grades, because it factored zero into like what the rest of my career turned out to be. But I really loved school. I mean, I grew up with teachers as parents, and yeah, I wasn't like nerdy. I had a super vibrant social life, like everyone that goes to CU, I think. But I really enjoyed the subject matter, and I did get to know my professors, and I was in the honors program, all that kind of stuff, just mostly because I was passionate about the subject of writing. Like I wanted to be a writer at that point, for sure.
Well, it's amazing that you found your passion and you can apply it pretty much to any different part of the world when you're a writer, because as long as you're passionate about writing, you can be good at writing just about anything. And it happens for you really early. It sounds like you get a job writing for Rock and Ice magazine while you're still in school. How do you land that gig?
Yeah, it's just that like I was so into poetry going into my senior year, and I had this epiphany of, whoa, holy shit, I'm going to graduate. Like, am I going to be a poet? Like, that was the question. And, that's an academic mostly track, like to be a professor or something. And I had always, like we were talking about, I was always on a side hustle, and I was always trying to find entrepreneurial ways to earn money to actually put myself through college. And those two things sort of came together. And then I was like, what do I want to do with this skill set? I'm not going to be a poet. That lifestyle, I don't see myself really wanting to be an artist on that level. I have so much respect for people who do, but I just didn't have honestly, the moxie for it to a degree. I was like, I want to do something else. Why did I come here? I came here to ski. So I think I want to work for a ski magazine. Like that was the decision before I graduated. How do I get there? I called every ski magazine on the planet. Actually, a lot of them were based in Boulder. I still have my internship rejection letter from Keith Carlson. I applied there. I went full bore trying to get a foot in the door. I knew nobody in the ski industry.
You're just going to make it happen.
I just, I was like, I can write. I think I can add some value. Like I can copy edit something. And Rock and Ice was based in Colorado and in Boulder. And I went in there. They gave me a shot. I interviewed with a guy named Dougal McDonald, who was the publisher. And I brought an essay. I didn't have any published stuff. I just brought an essay that I'd written for college. And he was like, all right. And they gave me a shot as an editorial intern. And I did that for a year and a half, eventually got a position as like an assistant editor or something like that. And sort of forgot for a second the path I wanted to go was really to be working at a ski magazine, And for a minute, convinced myself that I wanted to be a rock climber. And sort of like went deep with that and learned a ton, which came back around later. Like I did get really into climbing. I never led or did anything beyond like a 5'10". Got dragged up a bunch of stuff by other editors who were great climbers there, but at least got really into the culture. Got to understand that, some of the mountaineering aspects of it too. And then that ended. Like there was no more position after a year and a half after I graduated. And I was back to like, oh man, I got to get published. And I still wanted to work for a ski magazine at that point.
So when you graduate, is this around the time that you meet Bradford Fayfield?
Yeah, it is. It's 1998. And I was dating a girl at CU who was from Marin. And she was friends with this guy named Johnny Mosley. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, I didn't have any idea who Johnny was. And then the Olympics happened. We all were watching when he won. And I turned to her and I'm like, your friend is pretty cool, like, and so she's like, yeah, I told you that, and that was this doorway where I got my ear to the ground a little bit about, like, I had seen that these guys were coming out with a magazine. I think they put it in like the lounge at CU or something. It was the first issue. It had Johnny and Cindy Crawford on the cover. And now they were in my group. I was still trying to get to work for skiing and ski and powder and freeze. I was leaving messages with all of those folks. And now I had another target, right? And I was like, wow, this is interesting and different too, what they're doing. Like, they're putting people on the cover. There's no skiing on the cover. And so I heard through my girlfriend that there was this party up on the hill at CU that maybe some of the Freeskier guys might be at. And so I was like stalking, basically, just trying to get a foot in the door, and ended up going to this party and was like pumping the keg with this guy, and we're laughing. And I'm like, oh, I'm Chris Jerard. And he's like, I'm Pat Crawford. And I was like, I've been leaving messages on your machine for like 2 months. He's like, that's you. But we had been talking about some other bullshit, and like, we were having a good time. So I was like, yeah, I used to work for Rock and Ice. I'd love to work for you guys. And then Brad was there, and this other guy, Chris Tamperini, and our friend Mark Sfarian. Those 4 guys were the ones who really started it. And they were like, well, come on in. And, that was it. I started with them shortly thereafter. It was right after I graduated college. I had moved back to New Hampshire, actually, and had to come back. I had running a painting business back there and working on those boats, and was like, all right, this is my shot. I came back to Boulder, and that was probably 1990, very beginning of 99. They were just putting out a second issue, and I was the first guy, sort of helped found the brand, but was not there with the 4 guys who started it, were those 4 I mentioned, and just was the first in the door.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start things off with Rollerblade. Ski season is coming to a close, and if you're like me, your ski legs are really firing right now. If you're also like me, you sometimes slack in the summertime, and getting those ski legs back is so hard. I found a way to fix that problem. Inline skating. Not only is it fun, but it'll keep you in ski shape all year long, all while burning the same amount of calories that you would by running or biking. And if you're a runner, switch to inline. It's going to save your knees. And if you're a biker, save your bank account. Skates are a fraction of the cost of a bike, and they travel so much easier. And for everyone, Rollerblade has an award-winning skate-to-ski app that will get you in the best shape of your life for ski season. To find out more about the app and to find out more about all the amazing skates, head on over to rollerblade.com. Next up, it's Best Day Brewing. If you haven't tried what critics and myself are calling the best NA beer on the planet, you are missing out. Look, I'm not going to quit drinking beer completely, and I'm not asking you to do that. But we all have times where we want an ice-cold beer, but we don't want something that's going to slow us down. When you have to take your kid places, driving to the mountain, there's all kinds of reasons why you don't need to be slowed down in this life. And Best Day is crafted for us doers out there. The skiers, the snowboarders, the bikers, the skaters, the hikers, people like us. And they support cool things like this podcast, Michelle Parker, Darren Ralphs, and they are all over the pickleball scene. So if you play that, know that Best Day's supporting you. And while all that stuff is cool, I drink Best Day for the flavor. I've been loving their hazy IPA and their Kolsch lately. It tastes just as good as its alcoholic cousins without all the calories. I mean, these are both under 70 calories. One's like 53. So next time you're at the store, pick up the NA beer that supports our kind of people and will make you have your best day ever. I'm talking about Best Day Brewing. To find out more about the brand, the events, and the flavors, head on over to bestdaybrewing.com. My final sponsor this round is Elan Skis. And if you haven't had a chance to ski on one of the Ripsticks models, you're not skiing as well as you possibly can. I mean, there's a reason why Elan's been building a cult following over the past couple years in the States. And it's because their skis are lively, playful, fun, all while remaining stable at speed. Ask anyone you see who's skiing on an Elan, and they'll tell you right away, the skis are making them a better skier. And that's important. When you're buying a high-performance product, the hope is that it's going to make you perform better. And Elan does that every time. And Elan has some new models in the pipeline that are going to show a whole new generation how fun skiing can be when you're on an Elan. On top of that, they have a state-of-the-art factory that's powered by renewable energy provided by solar panels, and 70% of the materials they use to build their skis are sourced within 250 miles of their factory or less. To find out more about Elan, head on over to elanskis.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. So you come in post Cindy Crawford, and when you think about the whole landscape of the magazines at that point, or at least you think about the ones that are speaking to the youth. You have two players that pretty much dominate everything, I feel like. Freeze, which is the authority on the new school movement, and Powder, which was kind of the authority on the whole sport, it seemed like, a little bit of everywhere. And with Freeskier, when you guys are all sitting down in the office figuring out the direction that you guys are going, what's going to be the unique property that Freeskier is going after? What's your target?
Yeah, we early on in those days were so, when I think about it now, Mike, they're like magical, right? Like I remember so clearly being in this office above the Walrus downtown in Boulder. We didn't even have a whiteboard. We had like one of those easels, with like a huge pad basically. Yep. And we basically all lived together for those early years. And the real idea with Freeskier then, and even today, they're still around, was it's all about the athlete, right? We wanted to make heroes out of the people who we respected and who were driving the progression of skiing at that point. So initially all those guys, especially Brad Fayfield and Chris Tamburini, they came out of very like NORAM competitive mogul. Like we had a very like strong mogul legacy.
Well, they had a mogul magazine before Freeskier, right? Like XM magazine, which is kind of like who would start a mogul magazine. But they learned and then they started Freeskier.
That's right. It was Flip. Remember, Flip from Freeze. Yep. And Tambo, Chris Tamburini, and some other folks, this guy, Seth Berman, and they started XM. And XM was pre-Freeze, and that was sort of some of the DNA that came out of that. That was all Extreme Mogul, was that magazine. That sort of laid the foundation. Tambo and Brad got together, then grabbed Mark Safarian as the sales guy, and then Pat as the editor. And really the idea was like, nobody's putting the faces of our sport on the cover. So that was really, as a magazine, it was all about, let's put their faces on the cover. So, the second issue was that famous one with Victoria Silvstedt. Lubeck was on that cover, those frosted tips. From there, it was just about finding the person we thought was really driving things at that moment. And, we had JP on the cover very early, JF, Shane was on the cover very early, Seth was on the cover, Darian Boyle, Megan Brown. That was full face or body. And then a feature, a big, huge feature on that person. That was our differentiator, was let's show the world who free skiing is and be different than what's out there. Like you mentioned, Freeze and Powder. Like we were trying to differentiate pretty crowded when you think about it now. Like there was a lot of options in ski media at that point, obviously pre-social media. So those were the only ones. Is you'd go to Freeze or Powder or Freeskier if you wanted anything that was about what was happening in the sport, especially with the youth.
Yeah, and magazines were the most important part of media at that point. While the movies were arguably important, they weren't as important as the magazines. You guys could make or break brands and athletes. And it seemed like with the direction that you're going by putting athletes' faces on the covers, the athletes themselves had to love what you guys were doing because it was a way for them to create a personal brand before there was a way for them to create a personal brand. But could you guys, in the building, could you feel almost the power that you wielded over the entire industry at that point?
Not at that point, man. Honestly, at the beginning, it was a fight every day to get it done. It was 5 of us with very little resources and also young, man. We were like 23, 24. I think Brad was probably 26 as the old guy, and just figuring it out. For a while, I was like the circulation director for a while. I think I had 11 different titles in my 11 years there. And at one point I was calling ski shops, trying to get Freeskier into ski shops for distribution. And every call was me trying to explain what free skiing was. It's like snowboarding, but skiing, like that's the era we're in. The 1080 hadn't even come out yet, at the beginning.
Right.
So to answer your question, like, no, initially it was sort of like, oh, be on the cover of Freeskier. Like we had that Cindy Crawford, Johnny moment that sort of put us on the map. Right. And to your point, like, yeah, we're going to put you on the cover of a magazine. There was no one that was like, no, I don't know if actually Shane was sort of like, I'm not sure I want to do that. And, he famously was like, okay, I'll do it, but it's got to be Saucer Boy.
That's funny.
Yeah. And obviously Shane was so close with Jake Witt and all of the Freeze guys. It was a little bit of, all right, well, if you're going to give me the cover, like I'm going to have a lot of fun with it and it's going to be my terms. And we were like, cool, that's what we want. And that was the discussion we had with all of those guys, like JP, JF, Falou. How do you want to be represented? What's your personal brand? How do we do this? And then I'd say it took 5-6 years, honestly, we did get some breaks. And then all of a sudden it was like, yeah, we were the authority on free skiing, but we definitely ground ourselves down to get there, man.
No, it's all blood, sweat, and tears to get where you're going to get. But eventually all that hard work pays off. And for you, you're writing, you're selling in magazines, you're doing just about every different job that you can do within the magazine. And are you traveling from like December to April working on features and then coming back and putting stories and magazines together when you're back in town? And then eventually that moves on to like where you're more of a sales guy and directing the vision of the magazine?
Yeah, exactly. You know, that cycle is just like any of the guys that make movies, or at that point it was magazines and movies. That was it. And yeah, it was basically you were on the road from late November, December until it was gone. And then even in some cases going to South America, you know, and I loved it, man. You know, it was exactly what I wanted. I looked at it and I was like, there were basically like 7 ski editor positions in the country, you know, and somehow at 24, I was in that spot. And well, part of it was because I basically would have done it for free.
Sure.
You know, I think I made like $18,000 a year the first 3 years. I had to have other stuff going on at the same time, just was willing to do whatever it took. And yes, I got to travel all over the place, man. And it was a great misspent youth.
When you think of like the dream trips that you're able to go on, what's the best of it all? When it lines up condition-wise and athlete-wise, when you think back to that one amazing trip, although you've had hundreds of them, I'm sure, but when you think about the best of it, like who was there and what was it?
I mean, Alaska, there's no substitute, right? Some of those trips to friends up at Points North and with H2O also, like when those trips lined up and we got it, that's the North Shore, you know, and just being scared at the same time of some of the things that we got to ski. And those are the trips to me now as more of a civilian out of the ski industry. And those were the height in my mind from a pure skiing perspective, and seeing some of the athletes just flash stuff that you're like, wow, that is next level in terms of their abilities. Some of the cultural trips though, Europe, I remember some early trips to Courmayeur and that whole zone, just more of the lunchtime wine and that kind of stuff. Japan, certainly some really incredible trips with the Araj and Armada team. I had a few years there where we did Norway, you know, like Chris O'Connell and TJ Schiller, Corey Vanuler, JP on a lot of those trips to Japan also, and being with that whole crew, the Araj Armada sort of partnership that they had going with those teams.
Yep.
Just some really, really fun, a great trip to Japan with JP, Michelle, TJ. You know, I was writing, I was shooting. I also was the publisher at that time too. So I was just getting to do so many things that I was so interested in, and spending time with people that I was really in awe of in terms of their skiing abilities. And I got to chase them around on the hill.
When you see all these guys firsthand and gals, when you see these people ski firsthand, it's way different than seeing it on the big screen, even though you can kind of get an idea of how talented they are. But seeing it in person and being there, you just understand the degree of difficulty a little bit more. You know, who are the more talented athletes that you were traveling with that stood out where you're like, Jesus Christ, that guy is good at anything that he does?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because especially when you're shooting and, you know, guys like Chris O'Connell who are like part of the canon, right? Like we used to talk about this when you're shooting photography in particular, there is a difference, right? The folks who are just so talented, like a JF, right? Like JF as an athlete, you just couldn't take a bad frame of him.
It makes it easy for the photographer, right?
Yeah, right. And Tanner, those guys, like you see the difference even at the pro level, right? Where you shoot and you're not looking for that one frame where it all comes together. It's like from the takeoff to the landing. And O'Connell and those guys at Armada had a lot of the best talent that was it. Like those guys, and like you said, gals, they knew how to pick them. Strokes and Oakley, and a lot of those athletes were just next level beyond some of the other folks who were really, really strong. But the epitome of now, like pros, right? Like they're just so talented physically and as skiers in terms of their style, and also just work ethic. Like, let's do it again. Let's do it again. Yeah. Some great memories with those folks.
So lots of standout trips, lots of standout athletes. And one thing that comes out on the podcast every once in a while, especially when I have a woman on the show, is the Freeskier hot tub photo shoot. And when that one was being planned, did anybody think there was anything wrong with it, or was just like, oh, this is how we're going to shoot the women this year?
Man, when you look back at that now,
it's a tough one to look back on, I'm sure.
It is. I look at some of the stuff we put in the mag at that point, and it was part of our brand. You know, we wanted to be irreverent and sexy, and we were sort of like, I think, emulating some of the laddie magazines of the time. Almost like there were sections that were like the Maxim of skiing.
Sure.
Right. And in retrospect, looking back, you know, it's just like, wow, early on, especially, it just was the time we were in, and we were young. And yeah, it is sort of painful to look back at some of that. We definitely evolved with the sport, where I think we transcended that, thankfully. And, you know, we put Lindsay Dyer on the cover, dropping Fat Bastard, and started to really show women for what they were doing on skis. That happened later, 8 years later. It was an evolution.
And I get when you guys did that, you didn't think there was anything wrong with it. And I know that looking back now, it is totally like cringeworthy for all of you involved with it. And everybody learned a lesson from that. You know, that was a different era, but I figured I had to call that out. Was there any other content that you ever got in trouble for or ruffled people's feathers with?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. We put something in the magazine at one point with Treadway that was about hunting, you know, and I think he had a good day out with the deer. And, you know, we just put it in the magazine and we got destroyed on that. It looked like we were glorifying the kill, which was not cool. We definitely got lit up about some of the photo shoots. We would do our apparel photo shoots with models and not even skiers. They were just beautiful women that we would put in the magazine. We got lit up on that plenty. Again, rightfully so. It was so important for us to differentiate at that point, Mike, from Freeze. You know, Freeze, they had the lock on like the skate attitude for free skiing.
They were punk rock and you guys were more rock and roll, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. And when Freeze went away, I felt like it was our responsibility to pick up the mantle of some of that stuff and try to carry that on, you know, and in particular with your company, man. I mean, K2, that was one of the biggest sort of moments, I think, when Freeze was gone, was to sit down with K2, who had never really hung their hat with us, you know, at all, and say, hey, how can we be of value? And really working with the brands. You know, we evolved. The Freeskier brand definitely evolved in those times from the very early days into sort of what I would call like chapter 2, when Harvey came on board, and then eventually like Digi and some others that were super influential and total privilege to work with, like who really evolved the Freeskier brand.
Yeah, you guys became the most talented group of people in the industry, I feel like, who could really just change things via marketing based on the way that you could code and bring an idea to life with your vision. But we have to back up to one point in 2001, Time Warner or whatever. They end up purchasing like skiing, Transworld, snowboarding, Warren Miller Productions, Freeze. And that's huge news. And then, like you said, fast forward to 2005, Transworld shuts the door down on Freeze Magazine. And that's a huge blow that effectively kills your biggest competition and leaves you guys as the voice for skiing. And you had brought up the whole K2 thing. And I should bring this up as well. When we started conversations back then, when Freeze had gone out of business and we're talking in-house, I think you had sat down with Matura and Goot, and I don't know who else was in the meeting on your guys' end, but they came back to K2 and was like, hey, Freeskier pretty much has told us that we have to advertise with them because we have no other options to speak to the youth. And we're all sitting in a room laughing like there are other options. What are they going to be? And we bounced around a bunch of different ideas. And one of them was like, we just go full on with Freeskier. We get the inside cover like K2 does with Freeze. And we get that spread. And, you know, that's our position. Or we say, fuck those guys. And we start our own magazine. And we tell them, we don't need to advertise with you. We're going to create our own magazine. It's going to be just like Freeze, but we're going to call it Skis. It's going to be K2 centric. And we're going to make it free 99. Meaning we're giving away however many copies we make. I think it was like 30,000 copies or something like that. What was the reaction on the Freeskier side when you guys heard that from us?
Well, I remember that super clearly because I had been talking to Goot and Matura. You know, to be honest, I think they sort of looked at me as just this like persistent geek that just kept coming back and saying, hey, like, can we do something with you? But I had a lot of respect for everything that K2 was doing, and I understood the relationship. I mean, you guys were like in each other's weddings and stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Between Freeze and so there was no competition there. And when Freeze went under, like I said, I remember having conversations with Brad about this and others where it's like, look, our job now, like we cannot be arrogant. But we went to Vegas that year and sat down with Matura, and you probably were in that. I don't know if you were in that meeting or not, but with Goot and some others.
I think we were all sitting around the TV and that 3-story booth back then.
Yeah, right. And there was this moment, it was a botched moment, because one of the editors that we were with, good friend, I'm not going to mention his name, but he sort of played that. He said, hey, man, you don't have any other option. And I remember trying to reel that in because I knew you guys. And I was like, dude, that is the exact fucking wrong thing to say.
It was just one sentence.
Yeah, it was one sentence. And I was like, whoa. Because I also understood marketing more than this editor did and was like, you have a lot of options. I understand you have tons of options. We want to be one of those options. But the cat came out of the bag there, man. Toothpaste was out of the tube. And I just remember how hard I had to work with Goot and Matura over a course of years to actually get the relationship. And then we did some really cool stuff. You know, we did a lot of stuff around Plake. We did the skis for
Free
life.
skis for life.
Yeah.
You guys are the most talented group of people to work with. We could come to you and we'd say, Chris, we need something unique, out of the box that no one else is doing, and we want to do it around Seth. What should we do? You'd sit down with Digi and whoever else you would sit down with, come back with a vision. We'd bounce ideas off each other, and we'd come up with some cool fucking shit. And you do that for every brand in the industry, it seems like, because everybody wanted something unique. It wasn't just K2 saying, I want something different than everybody else. So you have to constantly think of different platforms for brands. And when you think of that, what was the best and most fun thing that you did? Because, I mean, there's K2 stuff, sure, but I'm sure there's better stuff that you did. And what was it?
Custer, you know, the Free Skis for Life was one that I was really, really proud of. I mean, we didn't invent anything new, but just to be able to bring that. I always talk also about doing the down home tour, living with Kimberly and Glenn in an RV for 2 weeks in the middle of the coldest winter in history in New England. You know, it was those kind of things, experiential stuff combined with like us, like you said, with Harvey and Digi and Pat, being able to put together programs that I felt like were sort of cutting edge in combination with experiential, in combination with, you know, a brand and in print. We did a lot of really fun things with K2. We did some things with Rozzy and Dina Star. I mean, a lot of the hard goods companies were always looking to do something different. You know, we did the Lang Girl thing with those guys. That was also a digital program that was interesting and fun, you know, for the time. It was not always from a business perspective. It was incredibly time consuming. And, you know, it wasn't just like selling straight media. We were sort of an agency at the same time.
For sure.
Which was sort of tough in terms of time and everything and in how that business actually works, but totally worth it from a brand perspective. And that's what K2 in particular really demanded. It was like, we were not going to do just the normal thing, right? And you guys were really good at just laying that down and saying that's how it's going to be.
It's time for my second sponsor break. And if you haven't shopped at Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, you aren't only letting me down, you are missing out on the best shopping experience online or in person. Peter Glenn has all the brands, all the deals, and the best products from the world of ski, snowboard, inline, wakeboarding, and so much more. What I love about Peter Glenn is that they price match. If you find a product at a reputable dealer for a lower price, Peter Glenn will match that price. They also offer free shipping on orders of $50 or more, and it's always easy to return something at Peter Glenn if you don't like it. That's important, because if you get something that doesn't fit, you don't want to hassle returning it. And some retailers make it a hassle, not Peter Glenn. So next time you're in the market for anything outdoor related, support the brand that makes this show happen and head on over to peterglenn.com. My final sponsor is Stanley, the iconic Seattle brand that has been outfitting your adventures since 1913. For over 90 years, Stanley has been the right choice for the planet. And if you don't have a Stanley water bottle, it's time to rethink your drinking habits. I mean, it's 2023, and using single-use plastics are unacceptable these days. Good thing is, I'm going to make it easier than ever for you to get that water bottle, all of your camping and storage needs, and more. Yep, I'm going to save you 30% on all of your Stanley products. If I were you, I would pick up 6 of the pint glasses, which I use every single day, a water bottle, and a bunch of their food storage and camping stuff that you're going to need this summer. To get the deal, all you need to do is head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and when you check out, enter the code DRINKFAST. That's all lowercase and no spaces. And you're going to save 30% on your order. It's a sweet deal that I hope you take advantage of. Those are my sponsors. Now it's time to jump back into the podcast. You know, we could talk about Freeskier forever because there was so much going on there. But as things kind of move forward into the later 2000s, the coolest thing that was happening in the digital space was athletes and creators were utilizing social media in a way that they hadn't ever done before. And these athletes, they all became their own brands and creators for that matter. How did you connect with Chase Jarvis, and how does that kind of change your whole vision for the future?
Chase and I had been really early on, and we're talking 98, 99. He was living in Steamboat. He was an up-and-coming photographer. He also was just, even early on, I was like, wow, this guy is like so on it, right? Like, he would write, he would research, he would do the photography, and I was his editor initially. So I got to know him in that capacity early on. He was out of Seattle, and we went on some great trips to like ex-qualifiers together. You know, we spent a bunch of time traveling around. He was the photographer, I was the writer or the representative of Freeskier. In some cases, we were going to a comp or something. So he and I had just become really good friends and kept in touch. You know, as time progresses, his business evolves. He sort of moves out of the ski industry to a certain degree and starts working with like bigger brands, doing more commercial kind of stuff. And he and I just stayed in touch. And I was always really a fan of how he had progressed his business and his thought process on things. And at some point, maybe it was 2007 or 8, so we had started moving more rapidly into social media at Freeskier, you know, in large part because of Harvey and Digi, who were total pioneers. And obviously Harvey with New Schoolers, and Digi was super early with Facebook and trying to understand how to utilize those platforms. It was sort of the beginning of all of that. And we were all so young and had nothing to lose. It was part of the beauty of being independent, is we would just try shit all the time. And so we were trying stuff on social. And so I understood it a little bit. And Chase was starting to build an audience. You know, that sounds like, of course now, but at the time, no individual was like building their own audience. We were the gatekeepers. The magazines and the films were the gatekeepers to any sort of recognition for an athlete or anyone who was like creating content.
Sure.
And so Chase called me up at some point. He brought me up to, he had these legendary block parties in Seattle where he'd bring in like the presidents of the United States would play for privately for like a group of people with a, you know, a taco stand or something. So he and I had been having fun connecting, and he was like, hey, I'm doing this stuff on Twitter and Facebook, and I'm sort of like getting some traction. So can you come up and take a look at this? You're in publishing. So this was, like I said, early on in the course of social. Instagram wasn't even launched yet. And, you know, he sort of showed me his analytics from a media perspective, but the behind the scenes stuff, you know, you're running a podcast, right?
Yeah.
Like how many fans, and it was just this total like light bulb moment. You know, that scene in Pulp Fiction where they open the briefcase, you know?
Yeah, totally.
And I was like, whoa, like this is crazy. Wait a minute. Like this guy, my buddy, has more people paying attention to what he's doing about basically photography education than we have at Freeskier. And we also had Snowboard at that point. We had acquired Snowboard Magazine, and that team was working with us too. So we had a nice publishing footprint, and yet Chase alone, just by putting content up via a blog and Twitter and Facebook, was reaching more people. And as someone who had sold a lot of advertising into Freeskier over the years, to me, I was like, wait, everything's about to change. Like, this is all going to change now that the individual is a media property, is a media company. And that really, I had to take a hard look at everything I was doing. When I had that realization, I was like, wow, this is not going to stop. Like, this is going to be a new way that media works.
And you end up working with Chase for a few years. You're still at Freeskier. You're still with Snowboard because you've acquired them as well. So in free skiing, you already know every single person. Now that you're on the snowboard side, you're getting to know everybody on the snowboard world as well. And you're figuring out that the future is athletes and creators creating their own brands, and they're going to have bigger distribution than even the media publications. And it's around this time that you pick up Travis Rice. I mean, that has to be mind-blowing right there, that Travis Rice is willing to work with you, where I don't know how good of friends with you are with that guy, but I look at him as like a perfectionist, the best at what he does in every aspect of what he does. Does that put a lot of pressure on you when you get hired by Travis to run his social?
I didn't feel a lot of pressure. I mean, I was with Chase for a number of years. I left the magazine, moved to Seattle. It was a big moment for me, just in terms of like almost felt like I was going backwards a little bit. to go forwards. Like, I had such a good gig with Freeskier and I loved that community and still do. And I felt like I had to leave it a little bit to go learn about what was happening. Like, I felt like it was going to happen. So fast forward to where you're talking about, I had moved to San Francisco actually because my now wife was in graduate school there, and I wasn't in-house with Chase anymore. I wasn't working with Freeskier, and I sort of needed to, like, frankly, need to figure out how to make money. And through Chase, he and I had Travis on his podcast, like Chase Jarvis Live is what we called that.
Okay.
And so I had met Travis previously through snowboard at like an ice or air, but really casually. And then we had him on the podcast and we went to dinner with him and just started to get to know him. Another really good friend of mine, Alex Hillinger, knew Travis and was good friends with him. And at that point, it was more like with Travis and then eventually Jimmy, Chin, and some others. These guys were like, I know that social media is important. You're the only one that I know of that I can see doing something with someone on their social that's like a business to a degree. Could you help me with my social media? Was sort of the entree into all of those conversations. I need help with Facebook and Twitter, right? And I was, I can help you. Like, and we went through a whole brand exercise. I would take what we did with Freeskier, like, what's your personal brand? Who do you follow? And more or less work with them to create their personal brand online to create and get a following, and then be able to utilize that for their business purposes. And that was 2011. I started working with Travis and with Jimmy. They both had pretty small followings at that point, and spent a lot of time with both of them as a result. And yeah, become good friends with both those guys by working through all the releases of, whether it's like the fourth phase we worked on a ton, all of Travis's personal movie projects, and helping push all of that around his personal brand on social, especially when Instagram started to become a thing. Jimmy had 14,000 total followers when I started working with him. He's, got like 5 million now.
So you guys have proven that you can build social audiences, and you're proving it with Jimmy Chin and Travis Rice, which means that anybody that you go sell yourself to is going to be like a believer, because you've got two of the most important people in these sports that you're representing, and you can prove that you're a success with them. And this is the foundation for Inkwell, which is kind of like, it's a social media agency, right? You're creating content, distributing content, and managing people's online presence.
Yeah, I was working individually with Travis and Jimmy and Simon Dumont at that time, and Chris Davenport, and a whole group of folks who I'd known through skiing and snowboarding, and then started to pick up some other folks who were sort of adjacent, like fitness people, Kelly and Juliet Starrett. And I was just getting a really good mentor of mine said, hey, get 5 clients and see how it goes. And so I got 5 clients, and I started to just be so busy that I knew I had to create a business. And so I reached out to my old Freeskier buddies, a guy who hired me, Pat Crawford, like I described, and Luke Blazer, who I'd worked with for a lot of years, and said, hey, do you guys want to form a business? And so we formed Inkwell. And Inkwell, the name itself was like, the creative source to help. We didn't do much, to tell you the truth, Mike. Like, we just had incredibly talented people like Jimmy and Travis, and helped them organize that in a way that would build an audience. Like, we were lucky and fortunate to be around people who just had exceptional talent, and we just had to help them get it out there. That was the start of it. Yeah.
Well, it's right place, right time, knowing the right people, and then you being the only agency in town who's doing this at that point. So it's like you've got a leg up on all the competition. You've got all the right people. You fast forward a few years to when you start Roam, and Roam is another business that you create. And different than what you're doing with Inkwell, Roam is taking a lot of these same athletes, I believe, like all big name people. You're giving them an equity piece of the brands, their owners. But with Roam, it's like you're doing what's happening in media all over the place. It's a subscription-based model. There's free content out there, but then members can also get exclusive content that's behind the paywall that all of these athletes are putting out there, are creating for Roam. And you're able to leverage all of the audiences of these athletes. So Jimmy Chin's 5 million people, they're part of Roam's audience. And then Travis Rice's 7 million people, that's 12 million people right there that are potential customers. So it seems like you guys are on the forefront of everything with Roam too. Do you feel like you're just riding the wave, like at perfect timing?
That was the idea, to try to time these things with where the trends were around the things we really love. All these outdoor As we talked about before, like I had some experience with climbing and skiing and snowboarding. I'm a terrible surfer, but I love that sport. Trying to align with both photographers, surfers, skiers, snowboarders, climbers. That was the sweet spot. We had, through Inkwell, created a services-based business that serviced those individuals, but then really started to help brands work with what is today just influencer marketing. We call them creators. And at some point, we got to the point where we said, hey, why don't we have our own distribution outlet, right? Like we should create an audience too. And that was the beginning of, we actually had a name for it. It was called Project Duck Dive. Like, how do we move into another business that's more like what we did at Freeskier, an owned media audience, right? Not just an agency like you described. And took that idea of, hey, we had done some really cool things with going on photo shoots and then using the behind the scenes aspects with these guys and gals as part of the way to build audience. So it was this idea of like raw adventure from the field was the initial idea for Roam, and to really use social and all these audiences. Like you said, I went to all these folks. It was 12 different people, including folks like Sasha DeJulian and Rebecca Rush and a lot of other people we've talked about, and said, hey, I want to start this thing. I want to give you a piece of it. And used all of that to put a pitch together and went out and raised money. And that was an adjacent business. So now I was running two businesses between 2014 up until 2021, running those two things sort of in parallel, which I bit off maybe more than I could chew a little bit there almost. But it was a really exciting time to be building something that we called it Adventure with Purpose. And it was really the combination of everything I had done in my career up to that date to launch something that had all these unbelievably talented people involved. And it was this idea of building a company together with Inkwell in the background as like an engine, plus all of our friends who were involved with it. And we did some super cool stuff, man. I'm really proud of the work that we did there.
When you're creating these businesses, is there ever a plan to build them and sell them, or does that just happen?
Well, that wasn't the plan with Inkwell. I mean, Inkwell was, as I said, like Inkwell was like, I need to make a living. And who do I want to do this with? Luke and Pat, the guys I wanted to do it with, and who do I want to work with? And can I create enough value that people will pay me so that I can pay my bills and all of that? And that evolved over time. We got a lot better at building bootstrapped businesses. Some of my friends from the early days of Freeskier had gone on to work in venture capital. In particular, my dear friend Seth Berman started Sousa Ventures. And he just was schooling me. Some of the people I had met with Chase, I'd gotten a little bit more education through Chase. Chase became, a serial entrepreneur, launched Creative Live, raised tens of millions of dollars against that business. It just gotten a view into sort of the next level in my mind of business and venture and investment and how to raise money and all of that kind of stuff that I had no clue about previously. So to answer your question, like when you raise money from institutional investors, certainly their idea is that you are going to create value with that business. You only have a few options. Either you're going to go out of business and everyone loses their money, or you're going to be strategically acquired, or you're going to go public. And that's what they are investing. I mean, I had questions from investors like, how is this $1 billion company in the future?
Huh.
Yeah. When you're raising from institutional investors in the venture capital world, whether it's 50 or 100,000 or $1 million, like they're not putting in money to get a one-time return. Like they want a 100-time return, right?
Right.
So it's about creating something that has incredible overall enterprise value for sure. And so that's a grind. It's a whole different approach. It's very different than Inkwell, which was like sort of kill what you eat, work with the people you want to work with, and no board. It was just me and the partners versus like a board and a whole group of investors and learning that. But that's part of why I did it. I really wanted to learn about all of that. And I got a real crash course. It was like me learning to skate again, crashing into the boards back in high school.
But I mean, congratulations, because you end up selling both companies to Outside. I mean, Outside was throwing around money back then. I mean, they still kind of seem like they throw around money, but back then they can throw money at whatever they thought were problems to help build things. And you guys were going to help them with their social problems, because digitally Outside has always been pretty poor, in my opinion, and it's been getting better. But that's because they brought Inkwell and Roam in, and they were able to bring a lot of influencers and a lot of smart people who know about building social media into the fold. Do you guys make a killing on the sale of both companies? Like, are you guys I'm not going to say rich, but you guys do pretty well.
Yeah, I think it was a good outcome is what they would say. Nobody got silly, fuck you, rich or anything, but it was a good moment for myself and the partners and the folks who were involved with Roam, which was really any stress I ever felt with Roam and the exit was making sure that people who had believed in me were taken care of on some level. The fear of that not working out was a huge driving force because so many people had taken a flyer on me and said, like, we think this is a good idea. So when Robin Thurston and Outside, he and I started talking before the pandemic, actually, more about media, and he came by the office in Boulder and we got to know one another through a mutual friend, John Windsor. That was before he had started acquiring things, even when he was Pocket Media, and he had just sort of started the journey that is now Outside. And so he and I had a bit of a relationship already, and that turned into more conversations and then conversations over COVID. And eventually he sort of was like, hey, do you want to come join in this vision that I have? And then we worked out those details. And I think it was a fair and good deal for everybody involved. And as I mentioned to you earlier, money's never been my driving force in any of this. And as a result, I was sort of in a bit of a hole up to that point, you know, in terms of like retirement or anything of that sort.
Sure.
So the strategy was sort of to leapfrog that. I would say I'm at, and the people involved, like we all got to like a normal stage of someone who say like went to a normal 9 to 5 when they were 23, you know, and started putting stuff away. Like that's where we're at now. It was good for my family and everyone involved, but we didn't go out and like buy a bunch of sports cars or anything like that.
Understood. You also get a job with Outside. You're the VP of content marketing. And since you're like on top of the food chain at Outside in terms of marketing, or at least one of the people up there, I have a few questions to ask, and I'm probably going to come off as a dick. And I don't mean to be, but they're honest questions. And first, we've all been hearing or almost clowning the metaverse. This is a few years back. And then we started hearing about the Outerverse. How do conversations around the creation of this even start?
Yeah, it's a good and fair question. The Outerverse was something actually I was super involved with and is still part of the long-term vision for Outside. It really comes back to this whole idea of Web3 and blockchain technology. And I did a deep dive. I took a course with some of the folks at Outside, and this is part of why I was excited to join the team, is about this idea of learning constantly. I took this MIT course with some other online course on blockchain and cryptocurrency. And we, as a group, learned a lot about and hired some folks who were experts around Web3 and around this idea of, in particular, how IP, intellectual property, could exist on the blockchain in a way that the creators themselves, the folks who create the content, and I have this long history with people who create content, right, including myself early on.
Sure.
That the fundamental ideas behind Web3 and blockchain technology is that going around the sort of historical exploitation of artists and creators who effectively have to give up the upside to get distribution, right? And so the distribution problem has been solved more or less by the platforms, but they're getting 100% of the take usually on that. We create content, put it up on their platforms for free. The idea with Web3 is that the individual creator actually sees that relationship with the audience be tied up into an indelible system that proves that you were the one that created the thing that creates value, and that could then pay you and your family until the end of time. That's where my interest with it really started to skyrocket. I was like, wow, if this truly becomes and replaces Web 2 as a fundamental part of the internet, then this is something that we should really be ahead of. And that was really Robin and leadership team at Outside are very future thinking in terms of media. Where is it all going? And at that point, there was a moment with NFTs that it was like, hey, we should lead. Like, this is a moonshot. It's a big swing. It's out there. We did the surveys. We understood to a degree that the outdoor market was like, what the fuck are you talking about? And said, hey, it's our responsibility. It's our job to try to get out in front of these things and really lead on these ideas on where media is going. And it doesn't seem like anyone gives a shit, but we were like, let's keep going. Let's give it a go.
Did anyone ever say like, hey, we've never been the best at social media. We've never been the best at digital media. we've never been the best at memberships. Maybe we should figure out the blocking and tackling before we try to revolutionize what the digital space looks like and how consumers interact with it?
I'm sure some people did, but I wasn't in those meetings. I was in the meetings that were like, and still, I mean, it is, and again, it's why I really enjoy and why I basically put my life's work into Outside, right? My two companies represent my life's work. They're now part of Outside and I'm Outside. And to me, like taking big swings at things that aren't very well understood is exciting. I mean, it's the same thing that I dove into with social to a certain degree, right? That started Inkwell and Roam. I mean, I remember having conversations up at Ritalic with some friends that we all know that were like, you're going to leave the ski magazine to go play on Twitter. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
But you had already seen a proven successful thing in Chase Jarvis, and then you had seen Travis, and you had already had that light bulb moment in your head. I can't imagine a light bulb moment, the same kind of feeling that you have in your head about an NFT, where it's still hard to explain blockchain technology to anybody. And I feel like even just saying NFT now gives people a bad taste in their mouth because it was such a scam in the beginning.
Yeah, there's a whole side of it that's ugly, just like there is in any business or emerging technology, especially. But the basic tenets of blockchain technology and being able to prove that you own something and that those residuals in terms of your connection with the audience will come back to you as the creator. I mean, look, Travis is still doing his art pieces right now through natural selection.
But do you read the comments on people that buy them? A lot of them, when people did buy them and they didn't do shit with them for the first month or whatever, there was a lot of pissed off people who said this is an NFT scam. I can't believe Travis Rice is being a part of this NFT scam. A lot of those people feel like they've wasted their money. The only people who got something out of the NFT scam, and I don't want to call it a scam, but the only people that got anything out of the NFT program was anybody that bought yours and went to that Jack Johnson concert, because that thing was like above and beyond I mean, it must have cost so much money, but that was a true benefit.
Yeah, it didn't. And that was the idea, man. What we did there in New York was, Jack came in through our CMO, Dimitri Siegel, and he was so gracious and so excited to work with us on really the fundamental mission of bringing this idea of getting everyone outside. And that's really an important thing in terms of even what we did with the Outerverse. It was, hey, if we can bring a new technology that actually helps inspire and reward people for getting outside, then we're doing our job. And that's why Jack was interested. That's why, there was value, I think, to the people who went to those things. And that was the vision, certainly from my perspective and the team that I put together to work on that. And we worked really hard on it for months. And that was sort of the pinnacle moment. Like, we brought people together in New York and everyone was like, this is amazing. And then, the air, just like you said, you mentioned a couple times, the perception and the reality in some cases of the scam and the hype around crypto, the FTX disaster, like all of that just ripped all the air out of that completely. And we skinned our knees big time, man. We went for it. It was not the right moment. We probably should have listened more, but we really felt strongly that this is something that we can bring value to the audience with. And I don't think that we delivered on that, frankly, but I think someday we might. That's the idea. Outside.io is still a thing. If and when Web3, which some people think, hey, might be 5-10 years before that gets to a place where it actually can add value, to your point, of people not feeling scammed about it. But there's still a ton of believers in all of that. And I think the important thing is to come back to what the fundamental mission is, that Outside is like how to get everyone outside. And we're coming back now to, like you said, hey, what about the blocking and tackling of actually just like cleaning up your house first and foremost? That's exactly where we're at this point. And, the NFT moment and the Outerverse, in retrospect, I think there's a lot of us that are like, well, we went for it. Would we have done it different if we knew what we know now? Of course. Yeah. No doubt.
Well, it's nice to hear that you're focusing on the blocking and tackling, because I look at Outside as you should be like the number one media property in all of these sports. So it's good that you're focusing on that, because I know that's going to help things grow tremendously in the future, whether Web3 happens or not. But the next thing I want to talk about, which is a tough conversation, which you might not be even involved in, is the Warren Miller debacle. I call it a debacle, but really what it looks like is it's a 2-year cost-saving project where you guys are putting out movies. You guys will still have a tour and you'll still have all the advertising revenue coming in, but you don't really have to create a new movie. You're using old footage, and athletes and most filmmakers and editors are kind of cut out of the thing. That ruffled a lot of feathers when it was said and put out in the public. How does that happen? What's the thought behind that? And how do you deal with people pissed off about it?
Yeah, it's been a real kerfuffle of false information combined with new strategy, new people, and something I've been right in the midst of with like our mutual friend Micah and others who've been in this business for a very long time. And it actually, like, in terms of my career, Mike, like, so much of where I'm at is because of social media, right? And this was a moment where I'm like, yeah, this is the super ugly side of social media, where there were some changes that were made. There was a strategy that was put in place around what we're going to do with Warren Miller. And 75th anniversary coming up. Let's do a retrospective movie. That's been done a lot. Actually, Warren Miller did it 10 years ago. Like, that's the funny thing is, like, we've already done this company, which I certainly wasn't involved with it at that point, but it's already done the same thing at the 65th. That's what they did, right? So, hey, it seems like a good idea. Let's do a 2-year project so we can get ahead of everything. Let's do a 2-year project that will be a retrospective. And then the following year, the 2024 tour, will be all about the most progressive, cutting edge stuff that's happening in skiing in the next generation. And we're going to go and contract all of the best filmmakers in the business to do that. And we're already in those conversations. So this was all happening, right? Now, this is where I'm going to get out of my lane a little bit, right? Like, I don't know some of these people, as crazy as it is, some of the folks who were let go. And when I say let go, just to be clear, like, these are contractors. These are not employees of any company.
They're hired for 3 months a year, 4 months a year.
That's right. Yes. Consistently for 20 years.
So they count on it.
Yeah. So I'm not trying to take away anything from that. And they have been part of the fabric and worked on Warren Miller movies for all of this time and done incredible work over the course of that time. Changes, obviously bigger company, maybe the right hand not talking to the left hand exactly, but changes were decided. And some of the people who made those decisions are actually folks that we both know who have been in this industry for a super long time and decided to go a different direction in terms of creative. And how it was handled, I don't know. I didn't handle it. It certainly seemed like it pissed some people off big time.
There's like 2 posts that were put on social media that went viral almost, that just threw you guys under the bus.
Yeah.
And we believed them like it was the gospel.
That's right. And what happened, and I totally understand it. I don't even know if it was the intent. Of course, some of the folks in our organization would say, yeah, it feels like it was the intent, but I get it. I mean, it sucks. Like, getting laid off sucks. Not getting your contract renewed sucks. Then again, I've been in sales for a long time. Like, we were just talking about K2 giving me the Heisman for 8 years before we got it, right? So it's a moment that is not great, especially if you're part of like a family of folks who have been making that content for a long time. But what happened is that the post that went out was not entirely true. It was very nuanced. It basically said what you just said is, oh, these guys aren't making a movie. There won't be a movie this year. It's canceled.
Yeah, totally.
That's just like unequivocally not true. No one called us. No one called Micah. No one called me. No one called Robin to find out if that was the truth. And I think what happened, and I saw it, and, I reached out to a lot of the people we've talked about in this podcast and was like, hey, man, like, or friend, this is not actually what's happening. It was one of these moments that people saw the headline, and the headline was Outside Kills Warren Miller. And then they saw some of the comments from other people that they know and trust that were like, this is a travesty. I saw like Mike Douglas and Abma and Parker and Davenport, all these people I like have so much respect for, jumping on and being like, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. Like, it's a sad end of an era. Right. And we were sort of like, wait, this is not the truth. But once that happens on social, like, really the only thing we could do is come back around to people individually and just say, hey, that's not actually the case. You'll see what's happening. We've announced the next movie now. There's new content being created for this film this year. It's mostly a retrospective. We're also doing an outside awards that's giving all new filmmakers and photographers an opportunity to submit to win $40,000 in prizes. I mean, $40,000 cash. So that's the real story, Mike, is there some truth to all little part? Yeah, sure. But I can tell you from our perspective at Outside, like, we're in the midst of a 2-year project. There's a retrospective film that's going to come out and tour around from September until January, as it does every year. And it's going to go to 60 some odd stops and entertain people the way it has for 74 years. And then The 2024 film will be an entirely fresh, new project that will utilize the best filmmakers in the business.
Perfect. Well, it's great to get the real story because that's what we need. And outside is a very, very important part of this industry. So what you guys are doing has always been awesome, but you're always going to have critics, and you know that.
Yeah, that's part of it. It's all part of it.
Yeah.
You know, I understand why people if I would have been part of the peanut gallery too. You take a quick look at your social feed and you're like, that's fucked up. And then you just react. And that's what most people did. And I don't fault anyone for it. And I'm not trying to call anyone out for it. Like I said, I totally understand how it happened. What was crazy is how it then went from that, though, to actual newspapers printing stories saying that that's what was happening. Like, you can start to see how false information does happen. I've never been part of that before, but it was wild to see how that grew into something that people are like, yeah, but this is an actual story. And then even retractions and even us like getting other news outlets to tell the real story. I think right now, a lot of people still think that we killed Warren Miller. So we won't have that corrected until the tour actually happens.
Well, Warren died of natural causes, and then his son tried to steal his name and licensing and all that shit as well. You guys didn't do that by any means. So you did not kill Warren Miller. You're keeping him alive. And at this point, that's the podcast. It's time for something that I call Inappropriate Questions.
Here we go.
Yeah, so you know exactly what it is. I was able to get a guy who's worked with you since your Freeskier days. He hired you at Freeskier. He's the founder of Inkwell and Roam with you. He's now a peer of yours at Outside. I'm talking about Pat Crawford. And are you ready for question number 1 from Pat?
All right, let's bring the heat. Let's see, what do we got?
Here we go.
CJ, the first one I'd like to know is, I wonder if you could tell us about the fallout that occurs when an Italian tourism board just gives a bunch of ski editors an unlimited open tab for a bar at a hotel in Europe.
There you go.
Yeah, that was that trip to Courmayeur. My friend, I think his name was like Mario. I had worked out with the tourism office. For us, it was Pat, myself, Mark Sferian, Brad Fayfield all went over there. And we were working out what kind of setup they were going to give us, right? And this guy's like, Chris, anything you want, you're going to get it, you know? And we were like, man, this is going to be, this trip is going to be epic. Then we go there and we just started like, you know, he said anything we want, man. We were at the hotel. We were hosted by basically the country of Italy, like the Italian tourism board. And so we just started ordering food and drinks. And the first night, I don't know what we went through, but we ripped through a good amount of wine. And, you know, I don't think it was anything too crazy, but the next night the waiter comes over and sort of hat in hand. And he's like, I'm sorry. They say one bottle of wine. We basically got cut off by the country of Italy. They were like, you are not allowed to drink anymore on our tab. Sorry, you're done.
Oh, that's amazing. Let's jump into question number 2.
CJ, tell us what it's like to spend several weeks in an RV skiing bumps on the East Coast with Glenn Plake. And also, did you ever get to iron his mohawk, or is Kimberly the only one who gets that job?
All right, so that came up in the podcast, but tell us about living with the Plakes.
Amazing experience. Shout out to Glenn and Kimberly for being ambassadors for this long for the sport they love. I mean, nobody has more enthusiasm or energy. And, you know, this was now 15 years ago and they're still doing it now. It's just incredible. And I just love those guys. I got to know them really well living, you know, it was the three of us effectively in the K2 like RV, and just to see how Glenn and Kimberly treated people. I mean, we went to 45 very small ski areas all throughout New England over a 2-week period, which you can do the math. Like, we were hitting multiple a day, chasing night skiing. And Glenn's like the Pied Piper. When he shows up at these places, people recognize him, especially when the Mohawk's up. And he just would gather people and take them skiing, and just that infectious laugh. To me, it just was like, wow, this guy's the real deal. And so is Kimberly, just supporting. And every dinner we went to, people would be up asking him questions, and always patient, always had time for people, just such great ambassadors for skiing. And it was interesting living with a married couple in their space. Like, they were in the back room and I was like on the couch in this RV for weeks at a time in a very cold winter. So it was tight. You know, there were times where I'd say, I'm going to take a walk and let you guys have some time together and just work out whatever you need to work out. And it was intimate in that way.
Speaking of that, were you able to rub one out in the RV, or what? How'd you do that?
I don't recall that. I would recall that I did not rub one out in the RV, but, it's probably just 2 weeks of getting pent up there. I don't know.
All right, cool. I've never asked anybody that question before, but I felt pretty comfortable to ask you that one. Let's go with this final inappropriate question.
You're well known for your high-end driving skills. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience at the NASCAR driving school?
Oh my God, that's a bad one. Yeah. This was a Troy Michaels special, one of these Target wonderful opportunities where you bring in some media, a bunch of athletes to go to like the Richard Petty NASCAR driving school.
Experience of a lifetime.
Yeah, just like amazing, right? So I was coming in to create content. We get in, I think we're in Orlando, and walk up right off the plane basically into one of the famous Troy Michaels like sushi gatherings. I think X Games was going on there. So you had like Simon was there, Christy Leskinen was there, a bunch of Target athletes who were on the summer side were there. There was a big dinner, there were sake bombs, there was like a limo, and there was champagne. And it just was one of these amazing sort of blurry, fun nights with that whole crew right into the morning, like 5 a.m. So we all go back, get into our rooms. The wake up call was like at 6:30. So didn't really sleep, get up, and I feel fine at first, get on a bus, go out to wherever the track was. And, it's Florida. It's like 92 degrees at 7 in the morning. It's humid. I just start to feel really, oh man, I don't feel so good. And, you got to go through the crash course, sit through the classes. I'm just starting to get really uncomfortable. Then they put you in this fireproof suit that's super hot. You got to put like the balaclava on, and then like a neck brace, and then the helmet, and they put a earbud in your ear. They're going to be giving you instructions, and everybody's super fired up. I mean, like you said, chance of a lifetime to drive one of these things. I don't know if you've ever been in a stock car, but
no.
I'd never been in one. And it's like, you got to get in the window, and all it is this like Tonka set sort of shifter that has 3 gears. It looks like just raw engineering in there. There's no like dashboard or anything. And I can barely see over, and it's by design in those stock cars, like you just can see the track ahead of you. And I feel like I'm about to pass out. I have the worst headache of my life. And we're about to go like 180 miles an hour racing each other around this track. And we do the first race, and, it's this whole thing where they are in your ear. If somebody comes up on you, they'll tell you, hey, you got to pull over, right? Like pull up the track up to the right and put your hand up and then pull up so that they can go around you. And man, I shouldn't have been driving probably anyways. And like, I was in so much pain that I was just trying to get through it, which is so sad, right? Like in that moment. So all it was just the squawking of like, okay, up and to the right, car 14, up to the right. Like everyone's just passing me, right? And I think it's like that scene in like, what's the Ricky Bobby movie there with Will Ferrell?
I know what you're talking about, yeah.
When he comes back and he's going like 8 miles an hour on this track, like I think I was like I certainly wasn't racing. And we pull in and everybody gets out and everyone's like high-fiving and everyone's like, man, I passed you on turn 3. That was it, just giving each other shit, so competitive. And they all turn to me. I know all these people are my friends, and this is how bad you knew it was. Like, I think Simon seriously patted me on the shoulder and was like, hey, you did good. You did good, buddy. Like, here's a coloring book, like I was so bad that my good friends couldn't even give me shit about it. They actually thought I was that bad. It was a very embarrassing moment. It definitely taught me a lesson again on like overdoing it, and pulled back a lot on that in my life. And it was a great, I always apologize to Troy because he trusted me to come in and do that. He of course gave everybody another go at it. And I was like, I can't do it. I drove to the airport and got out of there with my tail between my legs.
Oh man, Patrick, ending this one on a down note right there, but at least you've driven a NASCAR car. So that's Inappropriate Questions. And that's our podcast. And looking at your life and times, I was going to talk all about how I thought it was so cool that you traveled the world and that you got to travel with all these amazing athletes and that you built these companies and you did all these cool things. But really, the cool part about your story is your tenacity, is that everything that you got was because you were calling people and making shit happen. And anybody who wants to get in this industry, because I was the same way. It's like if you see an opening and you know you're going to be good at it and you're passionate about it, you make those phone calls and you keep harassing those people over and over and over in a positive way. Don't be the negative harasser and make shit happen. And you did that. And you've done that your whole career, and now you're running the marketing for the most important outdoor media conglomerate in the business. So it's amazing where everything's taken you. And we'll see how long you're there and then what you start next, because it seems like in your life and times like you're a dude who likes to start things. So it'll be interesting to see what you do with Outside. And I thank you for your time on the podcast.
Mike, thanks so much, man. I love what you're doing here. I'm a listener and a fan, and I love how you bring out these stories and bring the community together around this conversation. I've learned a lot about people I know really well. I recommend the podcast to people. I recommend that everyone does that. And yeah, keep at it, man. I love it. Like you just said, do whatever it takes, right? Like if you know that this is, in this case, is what you're doing, like you are doing that. But I would say that to other people too, to mirror what you're saying. It's just, if you know you love the outdoor industry or you love skiing, yeah, you just got to do whatever it takes. Like, look at what Mike is doing with the Powell movement because he's making it happen.
So that was time with Chris Jerard. And when I look at his story, yeah, Chris is a smart and talented dude who would have been successful with whatever he chose based on his tenacity, brains, and work ethic. But the thing that really stuck out to me was the lesson he learned from his friend who was dying of cancer when he was in high school. It was like Chris could have gone to a great college out of high school, stayed on that law school track, worked his ass off for some law firm, and maybe he would have become a partner today. But the inspiration that his friend had on him and his crew to follow their passions and to really live and have fun, that's why Chris is where he is today. And while I hope everyone doesn't have a friend that they have to see die young to learn a lesson, I hope all the kids out there decide to live a little bit before they get into the work world. Yeah, while having a track to be on is the safe way to live, life is all about experiences. And if you don't follow your passion when you're young, you may miss out on the best of them. And the only way to really know is to get off that track and to live a little. So to all those college kids and even those high school kids out there, take a year or two off and follow your dreams before you get chained to a desk. Maybe you'll find another path and maybe you'll live a happier life because of it. That's the podcast. At this point, it's time for the review of the week, and it's another 5-star review. This time it comes from W1Z, so I will say Wiz. Here's the review. Long-time listener, first-time reviewer. Mike, want to start out by saying I absolutely love the pod. 5 stars. Your ability to always say the wrong things at the right times has me cracking up every week. However, I have a bone to pick with you on this latest episode. You referred to the legendary Donnie Peltier as Donnie Peltier. You need to make amends for this oversight by having Troy on the podcast. At Donnie Peltier 207 is this generation's living embodiment of Saucer Boy, and Troy has stood on the World Cup podium. Well, I will tell you, Wiz, thank you for that review, and it's a very great idea to have Troy on the podcast. I think the best time to have Troy on is leading up to the next Payne McShlonky next year when he comes to defend his golden saucer. So if Troy, aka Donnie Peltier, is going to make it to Palisades next year to defend his championship and golden saucer, then I'm going to have him on the podcast leading up because I know he's had an amazing life and times as well, and he has stood on a World Cup podium. And I believe he's an Olympian as well, but I'm not 100%. We'll find that out when we podcast with him. So thank you for that review. Please email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com, and you are going to get a limited edition koozie from Puffin Drinkware. It is the cutest koozie ever built, and it's got Powell Movement branding all over it. Thank you for that review. For anybody else who wants to win a limited edition Powell Movement item, all you need to do is write a review on iTunes or put something on social media and tag me on it. If I read it on the podcast, you email me after you hear it on the podcast and you win a prize. It is that easy. I thank you for doing it. I also thank you for listening each week, each and every one of you, and ask you to support my amazing sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Stanley, Elon Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Rollerblade, and Best Day Brewing. Have a great week, everyone.